Saturday evening, the day before the NASCAR FireKeepers Casino 400 at Michigan International Speedway. Hello, everyone. Joe Samdiego, along with Jonathan Fields from theracingexperts.com. Definitely going to be covering this race plus a little bit of the truck series, just because going to record books for the longest truck race distance-wise, and of course some big news potentially tomorrow, which we'll hit up. And a big thank you to our Patreon investors, calling the show, Mark, Robin, David, and Matthew, for investing in the Grid Network each and every month. Link in the video description to invest in us through Patreon. Also, we could do one time through Buy Me Coffee, YouTube Super Chat. We'll thank you on the air, and cross social media, Grid Network TV and gridnetworktv.com. And of course, links to everyone's channel, including Jonathan's channel, in the video description. Jonathan, Michigan International Speedway. This is a track I feel like if you're talking about historic tracks in NASCAR, this ranks up there. It doesn't have a crown jewel race, but for the teams, this is significant. For the drivers, this is a big deal. The manufacturers. For 2311, this is going to be a big deal. Of course, they usually come here with speed, but qualifying, good day. Bubba Wallace, 9th. Tyler Reddick, 12th. The big thing I guess people will say is the elephant in the room is what happened earlier this week with the course decision that ruled in favor of NASCAR. This impacted not only 2311, but Front Row Motorsports. So there's a lot of chatter. Could NASCAR, in my opinion, I think it just seems unthinkable, pull the charters from those two teams, which will be 6 charters, because, of course, 2311, you got to include the rookie driver Riley Herbst, and then Front Row, 3 cars as well. So really now the ball is in NASCAR court, and this is probably not a comfortable feeling for the ownership of 2311 Front Row Motorsports. Do you think NASCAR would consider, even try revoking those charters? And do you think maybe they'll just go the other way, knowing that the headlines out, the controversy may just let them keep the charters for now?
No, absolutely. I think there is a chance that NASCAR could revoke the charters, because we look back at, the off season where we were talking about what's going to happen with, the charter system and 2311 and Front Row Motorsports and everything with this whole lawsuit when, 2311 and Front Row Motorsports didn't get the injunction. And NASCAR pretty much in a filing said, we're going to run the season with 32 charters. Because at the time, of course, Front Row Motorsports had 2 charters and 2311 had 2 charters that were part of the old deal. And then Stewart-Haas Racing had 2 charters that were part of the new deal. So, and then, of course, 2311 Front Row Motorsports, they were able to get those charters when they got the injunction. So my mind is moving at 195 miles per hour, just trying to think about like all the different scenarios and everything, and like what it's going to mean for the payouts for the 2 different charters that were bought from Stewart-Haas Racing, that were under the deal, that were signed under the deal, and like what it's going to mean for the two Stewart-Haas charters that were signed under the deal, and what it's going to mean for the other charters that weren't signed under the deal. It's going to be messy. It's going to be very interesting to see. And NASCAR is not going to back down. NASCAR is very strong. They have a history of this. We saw back in the day with guys like Curtis Turner, who were banned from NASCAR for trying to form a drivers union at one point. Stuff like this is stuff that NASCAR rules with an iron fist on. And there's a good likelihood that when we get back from Mexico City, if nothing is resolved, 2311 and Front Row Motorsports, they could be without charters, and it's going to be interesting to see.
That's going to be super interesting. This is something so unprecedented, because even when you look, we know we've had the NASCAR charter for quite some time. This is something from the last negotiations, 2311 Front Row. We're not signing on, and we're actually going to sue. Yeah. You look at IndyCar, they just started a charter. So I think they'll be following this like, okay, let's see what NASCAR does, because it could almost set a precedence of, well, this is how NASCAR handled their situation. F1, the Concord Agreement, a little bit different, but This is crazy, Jonathan.
It is crazy, and also it gets into all sorts of math because with the charter system, there's different payouts per race. So 2311 and Front Row Motorsports, legally they are going to get the money that they were owed, from the first 14 races. But after this point, like NASCAR legally does not have to pay them like the same amount like a charter team would. They could pay them like an open team would. And of course, NASCAR has said before, in the filing that they were going to pay the open teams more, which you can kind of read between the lines. Open teams don't get paid as much as charter teams. So yeah, it's going to be very interesting to see for the financials of those two teams.
Yeah, especially when you look at Front Row, more mid-pack. They get some sponsorship here and there, but I think a lot of it brought in from their longtime partners, Love, Noah Gregson. 2311 is on such a different level. The money they're getting from Monster, Terribles with Riley Herbst, Michael Jordan. And that's where I just think this is going to be crazy. The headlines of Michael Jordan's NASCAR team losing their charter. And potentially, I mean, I know Mexico City, we're getting close to 40 entries. Most of the races this year we've had between 38, 39, not a whole lot of the 40-point range, car range, and it just takes one horrible day. And I can't imagine Riley Herbst's mission to show. It's like, how do you explain that to your sponsors where in the beginning of the season, no, we got a charter, that's not going to happen.
Mm-hmm. Or, man, even someone like Bubba Wallace, who hasn't run the best on road courses, if he has an issue in qualifying and, he's 41st out of, 40, 41 and doesn't make the top 40. I mean, that's crazy, because obviously the way it works is, all the charter teams are locked into the race, and then all of the open teams, it's just, whoever qualifies the best will get into the show, no provisionals or anything like that. So it's except for the open exemption provisional. But yeah, this is, if you're Denny Hamlin right now, I mean, this is, I can't imagine how he's trying to balance all this. And I mean, he's done a decent job at doing it, and he's done really well at compartmentalizing things, but balancing everything, just knowing that like what you've invested so much money into, with airspeed, with, everything he's done, that it could just go away with this whole lawsuit. It's just, or potentially, obviously we don't know anything for sure, but yeah.
They put in so much effort for their new headquarters, everything they're doing for the sponsors. There's a team out there that's doing stuff to try to move the sport forward, along with Trackhouse Racing, where they're more, I feel, the disruptive forces. That team is up there with them, and this is just massive. And we know in the past we've heard the rumors that Tyler Reddick, if they lose the charter, he could potentially switch to another team. I don't anticipate, but if NASCAR was to say, hey, okay, after Mexico City, you're an open team, your charter's gone, could you see Tyler Reddick being potentially one to say, I'm going to stick it out with the team, we're just going to win, I'm not too concerned about missing the show? Or do you think a charter team could lure him and say, hey, let's do a mid-season swap, whoever driver we got, you're going to go to 2311?
With the way the deals work in NASCAR, I don't think, obviously the 2311 deal would be very interesting to see, but with the way deals work with other teams, I don't necessarily think that they would boot a driver out for someone like Tyler Reddick. It would be a very lucrative get, but sponsors and driver contracts and everything that goes into it, I just don't think so. I think they would stick it out and do what they can. We've seen it before with some teams that have stuck it out. You remember JTG Doherty Racing when they were at 37 full-time in 2021, unchartered, and it was kind of unclear if they were going to be able to make it throughout the whole season. I think they said the first 14 races were guaranteed, and that was the first 21, and then eventually they finished out the whole season. So I think they will stick it out, but then again, who knows? I think they will, but in this whole lawsuit and everything, the lawsuit itself, I think we've really seen an era of expect the unexpected. So we'll just have to keep following it.
Yeah, that's what's gonna be interesting. Just it seems all uncharted territory we're experiencing now. I do think NASCAR has to sort of say, okay, we got to show balls in our court, and we're gonna make it where you teams are gonna follow a line with us. They don't want to allow situations like this from occurring again and again and again. So I think it's not a good time for the folks at 2311. And doesn't seem like a distraction so far in qualifying today with Denny Hamlin up there, Bubba Wallace, Tyler Reddick. But the race day itself, that's going to be something else because Michigan, good track for them, a big track for a lot of the teams and the drivers, and of course the manufacturers, especially because Tyler Reddick won here last year. That snapped Ford's winning streak that went back to 2018. Then Ford had been winning. Last Chevy driver to win here, Kyle Larson, 2017. In the old 42 car with Target sponsorship quite some time ago. And this track, significant relationships when it comes to the manufacturers. They want to win here at Michigan. Of course, you know, the Chevrolet, Ford, someday Dodge, they all have their history roots. Detroit, Toyota comes here. They got to win. But it doesn't appear like this track really garners much of the big hype from the fans. It used to be 2 races a year, now it's down to 1 race a year. 2-mile oval, now we're down to just this being the only 2-mile oval because Auto Club is gone. And now this race down to 1 date. And the past, it seems like this will be the race. Oh, it's on the USA Network. It's on Fox Sports 1. It's on whatever cable channel. Won't be exactly on network television. Now it's going to be different. Prime is covering it. But still, I feel there is that connection with the manufacturer because this is the weekend where tomorrow, 1 p.m. Eastern, it's expected that rumor from the leak photo that Rams announcing their return to the Truck Series. So, Jonathan, do you believe Michigan deserves 2 race dates?
You know, I don't think it necessarily needs 2 race dates because you look at attendance and camping numbers and everything from when they went from 2 dates to 1 date, and like the attendance numbers and the camping numbers and everything really went up. Like the track was very satisfied. I mean, I have gotten the emails this weekend just because I know Dominic Otagon and Marcus Lino, shout out to them with the racing experts. They're out there covering the races for the racing experts. And there was even a notice saying, hey, you know, for parking or for traffic, here's what you need to know. And you don't get that with a race that you only have so many people going into. So it's a very well attended race. And I think the landscape of the sport has changed to where these different racetracks don't necessarily need 2 race dates. You know, they can make it work with 1 date. And I think and obviously I don't know the financial specifics of all this, but they can make a good fortune off of just 1 race date as opposed to 2 when you think of operating costs, when you think of how much they make back from people coming to the track, you know, activations, things like that. So I don't think I think for the racing, Michigan definitely deserves 2 dates, but I don't think it needs 2 days because with the way they're running, they're already pretty good as they are.
You bring up a really good point. The racing on it, especially this has been the kind of track where we've seen in the past fuel mileage races where we get that excitement towards the end of who has enough fuel. The track product, great, but I think it goes back to the numbers because we know things have changed. A track pretty far out there from major cities, bit of a venture to get out. I would love to personally see Michigan have 2 dates again. But as long as it's on the schedule, at least annually, I feel I could say I'm satisfied with that just because that's the only 2-mile we got left. I mean, we lost Auto Club. We don't know what Auto Club, if it'll even come back as a short track or whatnot. And I just feel the direction of the sport that we're not going to see the era of another 2-mile oval being paved. for NASCAR competition. Adam says he loves the racing in the Irish Hills. Of course, that is the big nickname. The Irish Hills, Brooklyn, Michigan, home of Michigan International Speedway. And once again, I feel like we've been saying this quite a bit because it's now the fourth time. Chase Briscoe on the pole for the race. Another fast lap, solid effort. But I know this past week, it's already started with Tanner a little bit on this show. Like, they got to do something on the track. They have to prove they're doing. And now we're starting to hear more people saying, okay, third pole in a row. So 3 consecutive races. You got the Daytona 500 pole. The results don't exactly show. Now, of course, it's very different compared to pole in F1. You're likely going to win that race. Here, it's 30 plus drivers, the stages, so many variables that could change the factor of the race. And one of those factors has to be what the crew chief is doing on top of that pit box. James Small, of course, originally from Australia, been here for quite some time. But a lot of people are starting to say he should be on the hot seat because it just seems he does not have that record of converting poles, great starts, fast cars to long-lasting performances, and the result that you need to win the race. I got to ask, do you think it's a valid point for folks to say that James Small should be on the hot seat entering this race weekend?
I want to read you a quote here that Chase Briscoe said after winning the pole. So he said, quote, "I would say this is definitely the least confident I've been going into the last 3 weeks. Last 2 weeks, at least we went out super late. I think we were the third or fourth car, which typically advantage. I knew the 19 car has been good, but I didn't anticipate getting the pole." You don't normally hear that from a guy who just went out and won the pole and has won the pole, 3 weeks in a row. So yes, I would say so. And I would also say because last season, Martin Truex Jr., earlier in the season, like you look at Richmond, he had a great shot at winning that race. He had a great shot of winning a couple other places. Went winless. And look later in the season when he started reeling off poles at Martinsville, at Phoenix, and he was running so well, like throughout, the end of the season, reeling off poles, doing well in qualifying. You got to the race and he dropped like a rock and did not get the result that we all thought he was going to get. Chase Briscoe, the same exact thing. Of course, the Coca-Cola 600, that went well, of course, because that is a time that's a race where, handling conditions change. You can really work on your car. You can make adjustments. There's more variability. But in these shorter time spans and everything that we have, with only so much practice and only so many opportunities to make adjustments and get stuff done, races like Nashville, I think, are emblematic of what is going on over that team, where Chase Briscoe is able to run well when he's up front and he has clean air and running, kind of controlling his own destiny, but gets back in the pack and just loses ground. We saw it at Darlington as well. So I think it's fair that James Small may be on the hot seat for this. So we'll just have to see how it all goes. If maybe they can turn something around, maybe it's something internal, maybe there's something they could find to where, we aren't having this discussion.
I feel like a lot of times we've heard in the past, when you have a new parent, it's building that chemistry up between the driver, the crew chief, the communication. I just wonder if maybe something might be a little bit missing, because I feel like Chase Briscoe, he came from Stewart-Haas Racing, and we know Stewart-Haas Racing was not exactly the most competitive team the last couple of years. So it's a little hard to gauge, but he has got to win with Stewart-Haas Racing over at Phoenix a couple seasons ago. Nearly won Bristol Dirt. We all know how that went with Tyler Reddick. I also wonder, too, if this could be a little bit of just Chase Briscoe and his ability to also give that feedback to the team. Again,
that's a good point. Yeah.
I mean, again, it's so hard just because we know where Stewart-Haas Racing was the last 2 years, and just seemed like, really, I mean, Josh Berry had some good runs. Him and Rodney Childers just seemed to click really quickly. Chase Briscoe, Ryan Preece, We know they went through Cole Custard and the 41 team. I just feel like it's really hard to gauge, but I just think we're in this situation now where you just need a simple win to get into the playoffs. That could change everything. I do think the temperature does increase higher and higher at a much faster rate compared to the old point series where it was just a season long, the Winston Cup era. You could afford to say, okay, we're 20 races in. Maybe now we need to look at a change just to build for next year. But I think there's a lot of factors because I haven't been convinced that Chase Briscoe is sort of the long-term answer for the 19 team because we know there's other drivers in Toyota development in the lower ranks that could come up and end up in that 19 seed. So I think it's going to be an interesting case of the driver, the crew chief, could they figure something out together, like you said, and start bringing those results? Or could this be a situation where, okay, let's change the crew chief, still no changes. Maybe let's bring somebody up from the lower divisions. Be interesting to see how this all shapes up before the playoffs. And of course, taking a look at the playoff picture right now, of course, checker flags indicate wins plus a number of wins. Michigan will be the 15th race of the year. So we're going to have essentially after Michigan, 10 races left. 9 different winners so far this year. So there's still room for a new winner before the playoff grid fills up. Then it comes down to points as the tiebreaker. So you have more winners. Points will then determine who gets in. And we haven't seen that before, Jonathan. Closest was when Kurt Busch, he pulled out of the playoffs because of injuries. So we didn't have that situation. But 11 races essentially starting with Michigan. 7 spots unclaimed. Do you think we'll get all 7 spots filled with winners?
I think there's a chance, and I'm just looking at the point standings here on the side. You got someone like Chase Elliott, who's been in contention to win races. You got Tyler Reddick, who's been in contention to win races. You've got Chase Briscoe, who has, Bubba Wallace has, Alex Bowman has as well. I mean, all of those guys that you see there that we're both looking at here, they could easily win. They could win. And then you have guys like you see down there, AJ Allmendinger. You also have Carson Hocevar, even Ryan Preece. If we get a scenario where like it kind of comes down to a late race jumble up, we'll talk about a late race jumble up in a little bit in a different series. Ryan Preece could definitely be a guy who could sneak up there and get the win. One guy who also isn't on this list down here, Shane Van Gisbergen as well. We have some road courses coming up. He could easily win. You know, Ricky Stenhouse Jr., he could win on a super speedway. You know, we have Daytona where he's been really good. We also have Atlanta coming up, which kind of isn't as much of a crapshoot or a wild card race as Daytona or Talladega, but definitely could produce a surprise winner. So I would not be surprised. Not at all.
I gotta say, Shane Van Gisbergen, I think, is the wild card in all this because Mexico City, Sonoma, Chicago, one of those 3 races he wins, he jumps up a lot of positions to get up there. So then we're at 10. I would not count out Daniel Suarez as a favorite in Mexico City. The home country crowd, you just know he's going to be pumped up. He's going to do everything he can. And, of course, he has one in Sonoma. So that puts us as 12. And Trackhouse seems to be turning things around. Then Preece, I think, is a really great point, too. I mean, great finish in Las Vegas. I believe that was the 3rd place finish. He has some good runs here and there. And he's holding well, 17th in the points, just 2 away from Kyle Busch. Yeah. And I know Kyle Busch has been really hit or miss, but, I mean, he qualifies 2nd. Those RCR cars just seem to, at random, show up, like Richmond last year for Austin Dillon. I think there is a possibility we might have more than 16 different winners coming into Daytona. Then it's going to come down to points, and I think that'll be really exciting if that does happen, just because it hasn't happened before. Mm-hmm. It's going to really come down to the points, and just looking at the points now under the cut line, very close between Priest, Hocevar, Ricky Stenhouse. That team is just something else. I know last week wasn't good. I think he was sort of smart. Like, I don't want to do something to get a fine on the points penalty post race. So it's going to be really interesting to see how it happens, because essentially you look at those spots from Buescher even down to Hocevar, Stenhouse. We're talking very few points. AJ Allmendinger, 7 points below the cut line. And again, Hocevar, he's been showing the speed. I mean, second place last weekend. Coke 600 could have had a great finish until his engine blew. Priest, we talked a little bit about. Kyle Busch, good run one day. He gets in. And Chris Buescher, pretty good qualifying effort. He is in the top 10, but we know RFK, it just seems like they're a little bit a step behind everybody. When you look at some of those drivers, who are you most confident will get in the playoffs?
Among those drivers, like, who are on the cut line of the bubble, we have 17 drivers who are within a race worth of points of each other, starting there with Bubba Wallace and going down, I believe, all the way to Daniel Suarez. I have to look at the full list to see. It's really crazy right now. The most confident of the drivers that you see there, I think you can go with a guy like Chase Elliott. I like Chase Elliott. He's good on points. He's got a chance at going to victory lane. I like him for that. I like Tyler Reddick as well. Same scenario. He's doing good on points. He could win a race, one of these races here. Then from there, I think it gets a little more interesting, because as we talked about with Chase Briscoe, they don't pick up their race pace. And some of these other guys, like a Carson Hocevar or like a Ryan Priest, start picking up, or AJ Allmendinger. Even if AJ doesn't win one of these road course races, if he can go out there and earn some great points, if he picks up, I don't know, let's say like a couple second place finishes and, good stage points in a couple of these races, I mean, you're talking about averaging 40 points, averaging at least 30 points over the next few races. And that's huge. You could easily see him get up there to about where Chris Buescher is and all them. So I can't really say if I'm necessarily confident in really anybody below Tyler Reddick. I think, and that is a bold statement to make, just because with Bubba Wallace, we've seen some of the mistakes he's had and different things that have happened. Of course, he executed very well after a penalty. Bowman has had his issues as well. Briscoe's had his issues. I don't know. We just got to let these next few races play out, and I think we'll get a better picture. What do you think, Joe?
I like Carson Hocevar a lot. He's showing the speed. He could have a really good day, I think, at Michigan. Pocono stands out, and Pocono has his share of first-time winners. I believe the last one was Ryan Blaney with the Wood brothers. I could see him on Ross pace outlasting everyone getting the win. So I like Hocevar. Priest I like too, just because he does show a lot of potential, and I think he's building confidence within himself, that team, that we could go out there, we could get a win. The wild card, I think, has to be AJ Allmendinger. I know the last couple of road courses, he doesn't seem like the AJ Allmendinger where he's just going to go out there, lead most of the laps, dominate. With all the competition from Shane Van Gisbergen, everybody else, I feel like he's been quiet, but you can't count him out. I mean, he knows how to win. Watkins Glen is a good example there. So overall, I think this could be a really exciting playoff situation where if we have someone like a Carson Hocevar with his reputation of what he's been doing lately, sort of has the fan base divided. Then you have a surprise of Shane Van Gisbergen, AJ Allmendinger on the road courses. I mean, that's going to put us from 9 to essentially 12 spots taken. Then you're down to essentially the last 4, and it's going to get really tight because you got drivers like Ty Gibbs. He could use a win, and that would be something else to miss the playoffs after making it in last year and looking so good. Not even on this page.
He looked good in practice too at Michigan.
He did look good at practice, so I think that'll be great. It would be, I wouldn't say a big shock, but it would be a bit of a shock if Chase Briscoe could not get into playoffs. And I think people will really be in then, okay, you guys got to make some sort of change. Just because it's like, I think for me, Chase Briscoe's past, James Small as a crew chief, I just feel like they're missing something, but they just got to find that missing piece, and then they could be a really hard team to beat. And then there's Alex Bowman, who, point wise, when you don't count into the wins, he's 12th, but in the wins plus everybody else, 14th in the points. He is one of those drivers where I feel this guy, again, the rumors keep coming up about the job security. He's the fourth driver, Hendrick Motorsports, behind Byron, Chase Elliott, and Kyle Larson. Of course, two of them are past champions. Byron, I think it's just a matter of time when he claims his championship. Of course, got a new deal. I talked to Tanner last week. We talked about, could this be just setting up where it makes it harder for somebody to get in, Hendrick to pick up talent? Well, then after last race weekend, when Carson Hocevar got second place, it seems like people are talking about, can Hocevar go to that 48 team? And I'll be honest, I just feel like I just don't see that match happening, because Ally, they're very happy with Alex Bowman. They want a polished driver from Jimmy Johnson, a 7-time champion. Alex Bowman. Hendrick traditionally doesn't get drivers that have a bit of a reputation making noise off the track because of the way their driving style are. That would be like a Ross Chastain comes to mind. They didn't go for drivers like Ernie Irvin back in the day when he was getting a lot of flack for how he was driving. And of course, Kyle Busch, we all know, started at Hendrick, then went over to Joe Gibbs Racing, seemed to be a better fit. So if this rumor was to pick up steam or potentially happen, could you see Hocevar in that 48 car, and what needs to happen? Jonathan, I think we rose up a little bit. I think we may have. I think we may have lost Jonathan. Maybe the computer freeze or something with the network. So we'll try to figure that out. I know definitely one of the big things we're going to be looking at with Alex Bowman, I think, is what's going to happen with the next few races. See if that is an indicator of issues going on with him, the team, because I just feel, and I bet you probably, Jonathan, would agree with this, if we have a scenario where Alex Bowman gets close to that cut line and worst case scenario misses the playoffs, it's going to be really hard to defend keeping Alex Bowman. I think it's just unfortunate because you have a driver as good as Alex Bowman. It's just very unfortunate he is seen as the fourth driver, the fourth team. This always happens, where it was Casey Kane, where it was Casey Mears. It's just one of those deals where the fourth driver, I think, has such a hard time when it comes to making their case to belong in that team, because 4-car team with the superstars they have, really something else of a challenge. I think Jonathan is back. It sounds like we were back. So I know I was going into my perspective that if Bowman was to miss the playoffs, I think he'll be really on the hot seat. But to the original question, Hocevar and the 48 team, do you see that potential? And if so, what needs to happen?
I think the question only becomes serious when Carson Hocevar, if Carson Hocevar gets that first win and Alex Bowman is winless. If it happens this season, let's say a scenario where maybe this weekend, Carson Hocevar goes out and wins the race, and maybe Alex Bowman doesn't have the best of day, doesn't execute well, then the question might start to be raised. Now, I don't want to feel speculation about this because Ally has said they are happy with Alex Bowman. Hendrick Motorsports has said we are happy with Alex Bowman. So they are happy with Alex Bowman. But NASCAR is a cutthroat. I mean, the NASCAR Cup Series is really cutthroat right now, where we've seen it before. Some drivers who have kind of been in slumps and haven't done so well have been on the chopping block, where at one point they're good relationships and then it fell through. It didn't work out, and I think if Carson Hocevar is able to execute and win a race or two in a Spire Motorsports car, no less, and that doesn't take anything away from Spire Motorsports because they're doing a great job, but just a team that has progressed really, really quickly from going from they have never had a car finish top 20 in the Cup Series point standings ever before. For him to go out there, if he can win and then maybe win again and make the playoffs and be a threat, Hendrick Motorsports would be crazy to not be all over that. Just to consider him for that ride. But then again, that might also raise the idea of, well, hey, if Alex still isn't running well, still isn't getting the finishes he needs, things like that, maybe there needs to be a change on the crew chief side, or there needs to be something different, like we talked about with Chase Briscoe, to make this work.
I find it interesting because, as you mentioned, if Carson Hocevar gets out and becomes a playoff threat, I know I was saying I felt if Bowman was to miss the playoffs, that would be a big setback for his chances of return. It's interesting looking at DraftKings for winning the race. They got Carson Hocevar at plus 2,200 to Alex Bowman at plus 25. So I just find that interesting. I feel like, okay, more people are starting to feel like that's a higher probability than the Ally. It's something else, and I even find it more fascinating. They're both behind Brad Keselowski, who is just not having a season at all. Or watch, Brad Keselowski's going to probably prove me wrong and then all of a sudden get a win, but it has not been that good of a season for Brad Keselowski. 23, RFK racing, looking for a win. Now, of course, with all this going on, drivers have essentially two paths. It almost seems like use it as motivation, propel themselves forward, go out there, get a win, or it becomes a distraction and then they drop. Do you think these rumors could be that distraction for Alex Bowman? Jonathan, I think you
sorry about that, Joe. There had some technical difficulties again on my end there, but it's taken a Saturday, I guess. Like my internet is taking a Saturday, so yeah. It's silly season going to be interesting. It's going to be very interesting. I think it all depends on just the performers, in not see, because or someone like Alex Bowman, reel off or 2 wins or something like that to be able to, really prove why they belong in that call. Yeah, winning and running well cures everything when it comes to that.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see how it all shapes up. Of course, one of the big things for Alex Bowman, I feel, especially when you look at his career in the past, it's something where he's been with the small teams, the teams lacking the funding, the teams lacking the sponsorship, the teams lacking all the equipment running towards back. His big break came when he had to substitute for Dale Earnhardt Jr. Then all of a sudden it's like, okay, he has everything coming back. He's got the big ride. He gets the opportunities. He gets wins here and there. Quiet, but he is a winning contender. Makes the playoffs. But overall, I just feel like he could handle this. I don't think it's going to be a distraction, really. But at the same time, you got to say, too, there's only so much before, if you're seeing Carson Hocevar, the main rumor, because as you mentioned, Jonathan, it is such a cutthroat industry, that could become a little bit of distraction. If we get closer to the playoffs and you continue to slide, you're going to make those moves. That could be a mistake waiting to happen. A lot of variables are out there for Carson Hocevar, of course, for Alex Bowman. The thing I just find very interesting is just the thought that if Ally Bank has a sponsorship deal with Carson Hocevar, from going from someone very polished to somebody that, I mean, Dale Jr. was even talking about, sort of reminds him of his dad at a younger age. So it's going to be really interesting to see how it all shapes up. And of course, one of the big things, again, the playoffs, that's going to be very big to follow, taking a look at the playoff point picture where we have Kyle Busch right there in 16th. He's starting second. Chris Buescher starting 6th. Ty Gibbs starting 8th. Ty Gibbs is not even on this page. Looked like he was getting something going. He's been falling back. Bubba Wallace 9th. Zane Smith starting 10th. So a lot of potential shakeup in the playoff picture. And of course, one of the things we encourage everyone to share, who do you think is going to be out of those drivers potentially contending for the win in Michigan? I know one of the drivers I see as a potential contender in Michigan has to be Bubba Wallace. 23:11, pretty fast here, a 2-mile oval. They seem to always have the speed. Toyota got that win here last year, ending the winning streak of Ford. But you can't count out Chris Buescher, who was the last Ford driver to win here. I think he'll love to come back, get another win for the Blue Oval team over at Ford. Jonathan, when it comes to some of the favorite drivers here at Michigan, who are you looking at? I mentioned about Buescher, Wallace. We got some surprises. Zane Smith, of course, starting 10th. Ty Gibbs, Toyota won here last year. Potential surprise. Who are you looking at?
Yeah, looking at some of the ones that you pointed out, Kyle Busch, Chris Buescher, Ty Gibbs, Bubba Wallace, Zane Smith. I am looking at Ty Gibbs because he ran well in practice, like we mentioned earlier in the show. You know, Toyota has run well here. They're the defending manufacturer winner here at Michigan International Speedway. Ty Gibbs, if he can get up front and run well and lead laps, he's going to be all over that victory with the type of season that he's had, because he is a must-win situation at this point. But I think also at the same time, too, Bubba Wallace, who ran well last year, his teammate Tyler Reddick, of course, won this race last year. He could have a chance at getting the job done. He ran well at Homestead. So I look for the Toyotas. I think the Toyotas are going to do pretty well. I want to see a little bit more out of Kyle Busch as far as like longer run speed goes, because that's what cost him last year. He had some good short run speed, but he just didn't have the long run speed and the tire wear to kind of hold on. Chris Buescher, I want to see just a little bit more, but I think if he gets some track position, he's going to be hard to beat. And Zane Smith, I just haven't seen enough yet to really call him someone who could really contend for the win in this race.
All great points. And of course, before we go into more of it, let's go into pick a winner. Pick winner leaderboard. This is as the start of the weekend. We have not put in the scores updated from Marc Marquez winning the sprint race again. Marc Marquez getting Kiska and everyone else that picked Marc Marquez points. And of course, plenty of time. We still have over 120 plus races. Leaderboard is now up to 2 pages, so never too late to join Pick a Winner. Jonathan, I know Pick a Winner overall, you're getting up there when it comes to Pick a Winner. For your pick, who do you see winning at Michigan?
Yeah, right now I am lucky number 13 or unlucky. I don't know, however you would consider it there. As far as like a winner for Michigan, gonna read off the top 10 on the 10 lap consecutive average. You have Ty Gibbs, you have Tyler Reddick, Austin Cindric, Chris Buescher, Alex Bowman, Denny Hamlin, William Byron, Chase Briscoe, Jonathan Nemechek, and Chase Elliott. 10th, and then top 10 on the overall speed charts. You have Chase Briscoe, Christopher Bell, Chris Buescher, Alex Bowman, Austin Dillon, William Byron, Tyler Reddick, Denny Hamlin, Bubba Wallace, and Carson Hocevar. When I look at those two together, combined with how they're all starting in the race, I like Tyler Reddick because, of course, he is the defending winner. Show good speed in practice. Of course, it's anticipated that there's going to be more tire wear with this because they have the softer tires, which provide more grip early on in the run, but then wear out quicker later on in the run. I also look to, as I mentioned, Ty Gibbs as well, but you asked for one pick, so I'm not going to give you a bunch of picks. I will say Tyler Reddick goes back to back. What do you think, Joe?
I like Tyler Reddick. I like 2311. I went with his teammate, Bubba Wallace. I feel Bubba is going to get a job done. I would be very, very shocked if Riley Herbst has a great day, but you just never know. But Bubba Wallace is my pick for pick a winner. I feel like he needs to have that good run. This is a track that could suit his style. Besides the restarts, I think that's where you're going to get most of your cautions. The field tends to spread out. I don't think we're going to have a race where you're going to have cautions outside of the restarts. And I feel if that team, especially the pit crew, cannot make mistakes, keep Bubba out front, top 4, top 5 all day long, he could be a contender for the win. If that third stage and the fuel mileage game comes in, that's where I think he could be really in a good spot. I think he could put himself to save the fuel, get the win. And of course, that's going to be very interesting to see how Pick a Winner turns out. And of course, how the FireKeepers 400 turns out. In the chat room, Adam for Pick a Winner has gone with William Byron.
Good pick.
Good pick. I think you can never count him out. It's just a matter of having that good race, the car handling well, and what the rest of the competition does, because you still got Denny Hamlin starting up towards the front. Kyle Larson's always going to be a factor. I would not count Kyle Larson out at all. And of course, Ross Chastain, Carson Hocevar, potentials. Speaking about those two, they were in the truck race. And this truck race, Jonathan, was something else. A wild race that went into overtime. Saw a messy restart. Great save by Ross Chastain and Stuart Friesen, winner again, snapping a 72 race losing streak. Now, of course, Ben and Brandon will have the full recap on Grid Encore. So subscribe, hit the bell icon so you don't miss Ben and Brandon on Grid Encore. Plus, there are reactions for what we anticipate is the big news: Ram trucks coming to NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series. Down announcement or a big announcement, still not confirmed, but I think everyone's could say it's pretty much almost set in stone. 1 p.m. Eastern tomorrow. Heim Jonathan loses another one. Hocevar led the most laps. 3 overtime attempts. Longest race by distance. Overall, do you feel like this race, considering the streak of no overtime finishes, good racing, was this one step backwards from progress made?
I think every series has kind of a wacky race to it, maybe a wacky race or two. I think this was it for the trucks, on a track where they really haven't been there in a little while. And plus, too, I think also at the same time, like that wreck on the restart really kind of set things in motion, because if it wasn't for that wreck, I don't think you would have had the incident with Daniel Hemrick, because he had a tire rub, of course. He stayed out with damage, tried going for the win, didn't work. Lawless Allen, Grant Enfinger kind of racing each other closely and had an incident, and it feels like the old term, cautions breed cautions. I think that kind of happened after that restart wreck. So I don't think this really sets like a precedent for the series. I think it's just kind of something that just sort of happens in NASCAR racing, where you just get races like this where you get a different winner, you get a different outcome, you get different scenarios and circumstances, and that's just the way it goes. And I think that's what makes the sport great. Obviously, we don't want to see that every week, which is what I think we were kind of getting a little bit. We were seeing a lot of crazy racing, a lot of crazy driving from some drivers in the field. But when it happens a few times each season, it's kind of interesting to see how it all shakes out and what it produces. So I don't think it's a step backward. I don't think so.
You hit it right there, and I think this is something, not just the Truck Series, but I think sometimes we forget Cup Series, especially in the nights. You have that one race that gets crazy, the one that stands out, the Bristol night race. That was the one where you had to push, beat, bang, get around. So it was always, I would say, a show where you just knew it would be caution after caution after caution after caution. In the Truck Series, especially since these are younger drivers, I think you hit it perfectly on the head. This is not a weekly occurrence. If anything, similar to the Truck Series back in the day when Texas Motor Speedway used to be their largest raceway because they did a lot of short tracks. Here they are in a 2-mile oval. They got to learn. Mistakes are going to be made. At the end of the day, just the way it is in motorsports, and I don't think it's a step back as well, too. With that said, we're just about all out of time. And of course, we want to thank everyone for tuning in. Any final words, Jonathan, about some of the racing action or some of the stuff we've been seeing this past week? Because I know with words about Dodge, the Truck Series, the junction, the ruling from the courts, there's been a lot going on this week.
Yeah. It's kind of funny about the whole Ram Trucks thing when NASCAR announced that there's going to be an announcement, or we have heard that there's going to be an announcement tomorrow. Pete Pistone from the Morning Drive, Sirius XM NASCAR Radio Channel 90 said, I think everybody got that alert and read embargo as escargot. Because, yeah, this has not been, it's kind of like when Brad Keselowski was going to buy into Roush Fenway, or like other stories we've seen in the past, where we know what's coming. We don't know for sure. Anything could happen between now and when we anticipate this announcement will be. But yeah, this hasn't been exactly it hasn't been the Tyler Reddick to 2311 move where Denny Hamlin shocked everyone on the Zoom call and made the announcement. So, and speaking of Denny Hamlin 2311, I think we talked about the mental aspect of it, but when they get behind the wheel, that's all that matters, is just racing and going for the win. When you're taking 2 to go, 3 to go, and you're someone like Tyler Reddick or Bubba Wallace or Denny Hamlin, or even Riley Herbst, if he ends up having a good day, I'll never say never or anything. He hasn't had the best season, but just using him as a reference point. That is all that matters to you, is what is going on in that moment. And so I think you will see these guys still go out there and perform well. A guy like Todd Gilliland, Gregson, Zane Smith, when they're racing their different battles, you'll see them go out and battle well and lock in for the race. Because they are professional athletes. They are focused on this. Even when there's been things that happen in their families or things that happen with friends or different things like that, racing is an escape. Racing is a way to, just lock in and forget about the cares of the world and everything. And so I think you will still see these guys perform at a very high level, and they may have more of a drive to perform at a high level, knowing that there is some stuff on the line. If this all goes awry and maybe one of these drivers ends up as a free agent or something, they have something to prove. And you always have something to prove. Every time you crank the engine, you want to go to victory lane and win. So,
yeah, it's always a point to prove in motorsports. Advancing your career, advancing your sponsorships, advancing your team, so much on the line, and comes down to, at the end of the day, one driver behind the wheel, or rider in the case of MotoGP motorcycle racing. With that said, a big thank you to our Patreon investors calling the show, Mark, Robin, David, and Master, for investing in us each and every month. Link in the video description to invest in us through Patreon. And of course, the simplest way to support us, like, subscribe, hit the bell icon so you don't miss when we go on the air tomorrow to recap NASCAR Cup Series at Michigan, plus the updated grid rankings. We have MotoGP, Repco Supercar Series, and World Rally Championship. A busy weekend of racing all around, and a big thank you to everyone that has done YouTube Super Chat, buy me a coffee for us here. For Jonathan, I'm Joe. Thank you for watching today's program. We'll see you next time, and enjoy the races.